Play, and another book written in Chinese language, which translates to the transformation of Eastern countries in recent times, published by Jinan University Press. His publications have appeared in several reputed national and international journals. We welcome you, Dr. Ranjan. Now the floor is all yours. You have around 20 minutes to speak on the theme. Thank you.
Thank you, Kiranji. So let me take. Am I audible? So just let me know so that. Hello.
Yeah,
Yeah, great. So let me take this opportunity to. Okay, so let me switch off my maybe. Yeah, is it okay now?
yeah, it's okay.
Okay, great. So let me take this opportunity to thank Kiranji and Jagannath for this invitation to talk about China's new land border law. As we know that Chinese Standing Committee of NPC 13 have passed this law, and that is going to be effect in on January 1st, 2022. And this law is going to be a kind of, it's not what we say is not restricted to India, but it's like can be applicable to all of the 14 countries. But the timing is important. That is because of the India-China this conflict. The timing is important. Why China is doing release this Land Border Act. And as we know that there are like 62 articles and 7 chapters, and each chapters dealt with a different provisions of this land border law. So the point, what I see, my understanding about this law is that this is going to be a kind of like diversify the whole, what we call it, the own border management from the PLA is going to be a kind of like there are multiple actors going to be involved. Like we have seen here that how the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of China, how the Ministry of Security, how the local People's Congress, and also the PLA is going to be get into their act to protect the border, to manage the border. So this is more, I think, is going to be more critical. I think it's important to also to look how China is going to manage their whole border land. Now, before I go into details, what I see in this is, like as I said, is like it's instead of having this unified structure, it's going to be a kind of like a decentralized way of managing this border area. And as we have seen in many reports and newspaper articles that this particular act has no a kind of like external ramification as such, but it's only for like the Chinese law because it's a domestic law. But of course, it has certain external implications that we have seen in the case of our Article 370 of our Indian Constitution. Like when China was reacting, and then our foreign minister Jaishankar went to Beijing, and then he said that this is nothing to do with external dimension, because just change
Raji, your voice is
the
breaking.
fact on the ground that is for only for. I say, what is, because
Raji, your voice is breaking. I think.
again, can you hear me?
Yeah, your voice is breaking. I think you can log in on laptop
Okay.
and continue without video, because phone there is a lot of issues. No, you try both ways. Yeah.
Okay. Let me. I think just a minute. Jagan, am I audible now?
Yeah, now audible. Yeah, it's clear.
So I'm not going to switch on this video. So what I was saying that this is a kind of like what I see is like, and many media analysts have already indicated that this has no international ramification as such. But the point is the timing. As I said in the beginning of the talk, that this is more critical timing when India, China is engaged in a border conflict. Why China is doing that? Now, if we see the whole article, whole law, then it's also not about only India, but it also deals with, I guess, Nepal. Because if you see that when it says that any uh, land border are like pillars, that if habits change, the territorial natural mark has changed, then it will the Ministry of Foreign Affairs will talk with their counterparts. So I think like when we have seen in the case of Nepal, there were a lot of uh, in Nepal there were like a lot of media attention that how this China is like kind of like encroaching upon while there were like one pillar was gone have missing. So I think whole thing is like also about trying to kind of it's also about trying to like manage the whole border area. Now if you see that the articles, it has many dimensions, but what I want to talk about is like the more what I found is like as I said, and Kiran also talked about that the border is going to be a kind of like sacred and is kind of like inviolable, so nobody can transgress. And there's like it's also kind of like put pressure on the Chinese that there would be a no compromise on the border talk and border negotiation. But the point here is, I think, is only for like the Chinese audiences. Once, because the following articles also talks about that the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs can engage in negotiation with their counterpart, and if any act or negotiation has been formalized, then the treaty will be ratified by the State Council. Now, what? Let me go into one by one. Like there is also about talks about like delineation of the land boundaries and the defense of the land bound, and there is like a clear-cut demarcation about who is going to manage the border, who is going to defend the border, and also about so there is like kind of like clear-cut demarcation and clear-cut responsibility has been decided by this law, like managing the border area. Like it's not only the PLA, but it's like it's the local bodies like the People's Congress at the county level and ever will be responsible for implementing this law. Where I think it's the crucial point is, and there are also a kind of the articles also talk about that the local provinces and they can also make major a kind of like uh, local like laws to kind of like manage the whole area also. And they also try to say talk about that there is a kind of like economic opening up and the trade and the tourism also talking about so I think they also kind of like empower the local bodies to get into negotiation with the counterpart to open up the trade ports, like the border ports, we have the trade hearts, border hearts in like in northeast in India, like we have this Nathula. So I think maybe they are also talking about operating the similar hearts in a kind of like Bhutan or like in Nepal. So I think they are empowering their local bodies to decide upon how to proceed further. Now, if we talk about the defending the border, is again is the one of the PLA. So I would be not talking about the here the defense because I think Jagan will be a more suitable person to talk about this the defense matter. Now, the third part is talks about uh, the border management, and here like the internally I think the law says that the state means that the state council has this power to delimit the border, where they will be a kind of like prohibiting the local population to entering into a delimited zones in the border area. So I think, and they also disallow a kind of like prohibits the construction of any civilians structure They also, like, I think this is the first time I think they're also talking about uh, the the uses of drones. So I think this is the first time, and they're also talking about they put the onus on the local government, that is the People's Congress, about the using the judicious uses of naturals like water bodies, like lakes and the rivers. So, and they also empower these local bodies to engage in a negotiation with the other their counterpart to manage these water bodies, and also about the common border area. So I think this is more important for, like, in our sense, where the local bodies, because I'm writing also about this same thing, that there should be a local uh, government should be part of this whole management of the border. Not, I'm not talking about the defense of the border, but I'm talking about the managing the border. The third part of this law is, I think, that is important, is the construction of defense structure, and also about constructing the border villages. I think this is crucial, because here you have, so what I see is we will see in the recent days that there is more construction on the border is going on. So we will say both from the both sides. If we looking from the Indian side, so we will be looking at that Indian and Chinese are like accelerating the border infrastructure activities in the border area, and so there would be a kind of, like, again, more a kind of friction points will be coming on, because the both countries will be engaging in this border construction. The second part of this construction is they also try to kind of accelerate about the border villages. I think this is significant from the Indian point of view, where what we have seen in earlier, that the Chinese were not so forthcoming when it comes to, like, the local inhabitants of the border area, whether it's Tipton or Xinjiang and all. Now I think they have more trust in those peoples, and they are empowering them. They are, I think they're also trusting them to protect the border. And we have seen in the case of, like, Xi Jinping meeting some Tipton's girls on the border area. So I think the whole the table have been, I think, shifted now, the turnaround, where you have the local population is entrusted to protect the borders. I think that is very crucial. Now we will see more and more the local population, the local inhabitants, like whether it's in Xinjiang, whether it's in Tibet from our side, from our part, more and more Tibetan and Xinjiang people will be recruited into the army, I guess, now in PLA, and also about the border management in those areas. The the other thing is, what I also see here is that, from the defense perspective, is they also talk about that the defense, there is two kind of mechanism will be implemented, or kind of like created. One is like defense mechanism, where the defense personnel from the both sides, like from Chinese and other country, like in the case of, like, whether it's India or Nepal or Bhutan or any other country, the defense mechanism will be created where the both sides. And another is like border representative that we have already in India-China context. So this is from the defense perspective. Now, if I go into, like, and as I said that for me, I think is more important is that this whole approach is kind of like decentralizing the whole border defense and management. And this is not one about the PLA, but it's also about the public security, as I said. It's also about the custom. It's also about the immigration. It's also about the locals, people, Congress. And one thing that have surprisingly hit me is they are also entrusting the local people Congress to see the implementation of the whole laws in the border area. And at the same time, they are all have been also charged, or kind of like given a responsibility to suitably modify or come up with any regulations and rules to that suit their local needs. I think that's again very crucial, where the local government is given the power to modify or kind of like come up with any suggestion and a regulation that can, of course, that cannot violate the sovereignty and territorial integrity of China. That's again in Article 4 that the Kiran was saying that it's non-negotiable. That's a different thing. Now let me finish by saying that uh, let me see the point is okay. Uh, the last part that I want to talk about is they also interest like that. I think that was also case in the past that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of China is responsible for engaging in negotiation with the other their counterpart. I think here they also talks about that any negotiation, I think it's also in the case of in India that any negotiation or any treaty that they sign will be ratified the State Council by the China. So I think that's not a new thing. But only thing what I see and is again is, and there are like the fourth part of that law is talking about the punishments that how, if anybody is like uh, found to be illegal trespassing or like kind of like constructing the illegal structure or like kind of like if they have found or any like drones or any alien product kind of like things, they have to report to the local police, otherwise they would be able to find. So I think that's the other regular thing. Let me finish by saying that this law is kind of like their one internal, but the timing I think is again is very crucial. I think they also want to kind of like pressurize their, like in this case of India too, because I think or we can also say that this is also kind of like a reply to Indian abrogation of Article 370. So in a way that if India can do that to manage their own territory, then we can also do, despite the fact that they have there are some territory that have been under dispute. So let me uh, conclude by saying that this law need to be again seen in the perspective that what China is doing at the India-China border and how this and how we are going to engage with China. We cannot just take that because I was seeing some newspaper and then there was some report that it gives a kind of like immense power to the PLA, and then we will be doing the same in the case of India to entrust the Indian military to do manage and kind of like defend. I think in contrast to what I see in the Indian newspaper, I think this law is totally different, where you have a decentralized whole management and defense of the whole border area in China. Thank you.
Thank
And
you for
sorry for this. I think because I can't see myself and the internet connection, so maybe I was like going fast so that I can finish my presentation.
Now
no, sir. I think
you
your
can mute
pace
yourself and switch on your video, Rajiv.
Okay, thank you.
You can mute yourself and switch on your video so we can see you now.
so now
Sorry,
moving
sorry. Yeah.
yes yes Dr. Ranjan, Rajiv sir, if you could switch on your video now so we all can see you. Thank you for this short and very insightful presentation on China's border law. Now, moving towards the second part of today's discussion. Now, I welcome our second speaker, Dr. J. Jagannathan, to elaborate on how this new law is going to impact India. Dr. J. Jagannathan is a senior assistant professor in the Department of National Security at Central University of Jammu, Jammu and Kashmir. His research interests include trade and trade routes in ancient India, foreign and security policy in India, China and South Asia, trade and connectivity in Asia, comparative regionalism, geopolitics, border studies, and Jammu and Kashmir. He's currently working on a research project titled Implications of China's One Belt, One Road Project for India's National Security, a sub-regional perspective, Jammu and Kashmir, sponsored by the University Grants Commission, Government of India. We welcome you, sir. You have around 15 minutes to speak. The floor is all yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Kiran. Let me thank at the outset Redland Analytica and the team for having us to share our views on the most recent and topical issues of the recent China's land border law. And also, it's really very informative and insightful from Dr. Rajiv. In fact, it's getting here from the primary source that he could read Madrid and he could able to tell us that what exactly in the law. Uh, so it is also more informative for us, for all of us. I have a brief presentation, PPT presentation to just to explore how India reacted to this borderland law, and from there we I'm presenting a sort of an analysis, a brief analysis about how it is going to affect our border talks or our relationship with India and China's relationship and dealing with border disputes. Uh, yeah, next slide. So I start with the two premises. Immediately when the law was, the news came that the China has adopted a land border law. We have got a reaction from our Ministry of External Affairs spokesperson, Sri Arindam Bagchi. He says that the new border law, I think that he expects China to avoid taking any action under the pretext of the legislation that could unilaterally alter the situation in the border areas. So this is what the immediate reaction from the MEA, and also raised that it is a matter of serious concern that India is watching that, and India is closely watching this development. In the next day, the Chinese spokesperson from the Foreign Ministry, MOFA spokesperson Wang Wenbin, has categorically said that this new land border law will not affect the implementation of existing border treaties. So he urged the countries to avoid making any undue speculation about just a normal domestic legislation. Uh, so whether this word has sort of sent some sort of assurance to India, or it just a lip service or a sort of a Freudian slip, as usual, that word comes from the Chinese MOFA, that we're going to explore. Before that, just to get an idea about the countries that which Chinese having a territorial dispute, particularly including the land border disputes. It has disputes with 14 countries, including India, and claims a lot of huge tracts of land, and seeks to alter these boundaries, existing boundaries, or change the status quo. Not now, but it's been doing it for last 20 years. So I'm looking at from the strategic point of view, perspective, not from the Chinese. I think Rajiv can able to say what's the Chinese strategy at all. Next slide, please. As far as India is concerned, that how first we just see that what are the land border that we have a dispute with China. So we have a northern part, then the eastern, and the central. The northern part, as usual, you know that this has been there since independence, and we fought a war in 1962 over these land boundaries and over this McMohan line dispute in Arunachal Pradesh. Then there is a sort of hostility between the two countries, mistrust. We don't trust each other, and there is also the sort of a fear with that the Chinese fear of Chinese military adventurism in the Trans-Himalayan region. Only we had this breakthrough in 1993 when the process started in the 1980s with Rajiv Gandhi's visit. Then we started slowly reassuring ourselves and trusting each other and creating a mechanism so that we can work together to resolve whatever this outstanding border disputes, both sides. But the bottom line remained the same, that the China doesn't accept and the McMohan line as a the starting point where we could start our border talks. It does not recognize the McMahon line, and that's a big bone of contention between the two countries. So you have the disputes from the Trans-Himalayan region, starting from Ladakh to Arunachal Pradesh, all these areas, and in between they do have border issues with Bhutan, where we have a strong relationship with Bhutan, and we had the flare up the issues in Doklam in 2017 in the Tri Junction, and that's I would say that's a close beginning of the confrontation, and it has its route from 2013. That's the last where India and China had a agreement sort of mechanism, border mechanism. Next slide, please. So the eastern sector, as all of you know, that this is where we fought 1962 war over this climb of the China climbed the entire Arunachal Pradesh. The yellow line shows that the area that China is climbing, part of the Tibetan range or plateau. So it's still climbing, whereas the green line shows that this is a line of actual control, where the ceasefire line after this 1962, the Chinese withdrew from those lines. So again, there is a tension, flare up, and built up all these things that happening over the last 30, 40 years since 1962. Yet we have been talking to Chinese, and there was a lot of progress in our border talks since 1962. Perhaps we started these talks in 1993, and we have signed some of the agreements which provides or sets out the framework for our engagement and cooperation, and in terms of border talks, how to move forward, and also given some sort of SOPs, standard operating procedures, in terms of patrolling those borders, army patrolling, and so a lot of other mechanisms so that there won't be any misunderstanding and miscommunication on both sides. Next slide. Next slide, please. So the LAC, the line of actual control, it came into existence in after the 1993 agreement, and these are the potential hotspot that where it has been mentioned that 23 disputed and sensitive areas along this 3,488 kilometer in the LAC. Where since 2017, India recorded that there were 300 transgressions by the PLA troops, as and the Doklam face-off is at the peak of that transgressions, and it is actually an open confrontation between the two countries, and that shows that there is some problem with the agreements, that the Chinese approach towards the boundaries. So they seems to be more aggressive and assertive and authoritarian in terms of dealing with the borders. So they wanted to or expect to realign this or these border boundaries vis-a-vis India, and this has its root. The reason is that 2013, the launching of Belt and Road Initiative by Xi Jinping, one of his pet project, a transcontinental project, which runs through most of the disputed areas. I think that prompted India to come out with sort of a response that how we could legally or through legally we can claim assert our legitimate claim over the territories in the in the entire JNK, the integrated, the unified JNK, including Pakistan occupied Jammu and Kashmir. And as a result, the Doklam was a sort of eye opener for India that the Chinese approach is like one approach, and there is no progress in their border talks, and that was reflecting in the from 2013 onwards. That's the last agreement that we have had, and post 2013, despite having many border many round of talks on border disputes, there was not much progress, and there is no headway that they will be going to an sort of an agreement. And also on the parallel side, simultaneously the Chinese uh, constructing the road connectivities in the Trans-Himalayan region, starting from Karakoram to up to Sikkim on their side in the Trans-Himalayan region, are also raised serious concerns to Indian strategic planners or the Indian policymakers. So the 2019, what Dr. Raji has mentioned, that this China's land border law could have been a response to India's the scrapping of Article 370 or the Jammu and Kashmir Reorganization Act. But in fact, I would argue that this article, that Reorganization Act, could have been the response to the Chinese activities in the Trans-Himalayan region since 2013, and there was no proper communications with the communication with India and Indian establishment about the nature of their projects in the which was running through the disputed areas. And also there is a there is a sort of arrogance, not recognizing India's concerns, despite India has raised many times that the Chinese did not give enough attention to India's concerns over their CPEC, for instance, the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. So I think that would have been the reason that the Reorganization Act, in a way, it's a response to the Chinese BRA activities, which was opaque, and there were no communication and formal discussions with India. And in fact, if not even a recognition that it is a disputed area, it's indeed a great embarrassment for India's when it goes for any border talks. So in 2018, the Pakistan government has also come out with the resolution to declare the Gilgit-Baltistan as the fifth province, to give us some sort of constitutional recognition to the disputed area. So all this combined could have been had a cumulative effect that could have been India's response. Yeah, next. So now, when it comes to the impact of this land border law, and in fact, I don't have any idea about land border law, but since I heard from Rajiv, I got some sense of understanding, and what I've read from the secondary sources about this last 1 week, 10 days, about this land border law, I am of the impression that there is a sort of consensus within this Xi Jinping's regime, that we need to respond in a sort of to have a legal base for our claim. That's been lacking in Chinese claim vis-a-vis all these 14 countries. And that's why they have been criticized for being aggressive and authoritarian and expansionist. So their rise is very aggressive. So now it seems that they wanted to have some sort of a legal document to substantiate that their action, although seems to be a sort of a post facto development, but this is sort of an understanding. As what we infer from Rajiv's uh, in that interpretation of the law and the translation of the law, is that it seems that China is building right now. When you say that two important points that he has highlighted, one is the decentralization of border management and defense practices, or the defense mechanism. It shows that China is building a sort of a line of civil defense along this border with India. So it would help them to provoke militaries and with India in many where the weak points. For instance, Kalapani is an incident where the Nepal, which we heard in the last year. Then you have similar Uttarakhand. Recently, there was provocations in the Uttarakhand. So these sort of things, the Chinese PLA comes, then it would be reflected as an aggression. So now this civil defense, they will be provoking us. One the important thing that what we can read from the Chinese spokesperson's statement, although it sounds like a reassurance, but I don't think so. It's a reassuring India or assuring India that it's not going to affect any of the existing border agreements. But if you see our border agreements from 1993, and we had the 1996 agreement. In the 1993 agreement, we both countries have sort of accepted that the existing line is a line of actual control and there were in the subsequent agreement the standard operating procedures and modalities for patrolling and also the construction along the borders all being laid out, and there was a proper communication mechanism was established. So all sort of things, it's sort of a progress, although it is not it's like a long process, but there was some sort of communication and sort of an agreement where moving both countries were moving towards, at least to make this area peaceful and not leads to any sort of a military confrontation. And that was a sort of an understanding between the both countries, and that's how our bilateral relationship has reached to a new heights in the last I would say 20-25 years. But all of a sudden, the 2013 development, Xi Jinping's push to build a Chinese dream or sort of emerge as a global power had its own expansionist design. So whether this law, in fact, as per the statement, would not affect this existing agreement, I don't think so, because what we heard from Rajiv, there is a sort of localized change which is being authorized or given a legitimate authority to the local bodies and also the other agents in the local along the border areas. So they will alter the status quo, and they will be this agent in terms of altering the status quo with India or in the along this Indian borders, and this will be a sort of a new sort of conflict. And if anything happens, that the state will or the army will PLA will come forward and defend. So in that case, I don't think so. I think that we have lost that the direct communication in terms of discussing border talks with the Chinese. So the whatever the rounds of talks which is happening or which is going to happen, according to me, it's going to be all about the troops stationed at the demilitarization and withdraw of the troops. So I have predicted some few scenarios that is going to emerge, the possible scenarios based on that. And as far as the agreement is concerned, I think the Chinese have already moved forward. So there is no point of coming back. I don't know to what extent they will going to honor these past agreements in 2013, because this is sort of this is what sense of the things we could get, that the Chinese is reinforcing their argument that China is now an emerging global power, and India must recognize this, and it's going to set the new agenda in at least in Asia. Next slide, please. So the possible scenarios. So I'm going to discuss these four possible scenarios, and then I'll wind up and open for a question and answers. It goes in a clockwise. So the first scenario, what I feel that there is a sort of a new normal. This is post this land border agreement. So there is a new normal in India and Sino-Indian relationship, particularly on the border, dealing with the border disputes or the border talks. So there is no that's what the China wants to impose on us, or it has been imposing, or I would say it has been imposed already. So it is if India has to accept or not, that's India has an option. Whereas the status quo ante, that is the second scenario, is what India is pushing for. It wants to go back to this earlier the pre-Galwan status quo wanted to maintain, which the Chinese are not agreeing it, because that has the article, this Reorganization Act in 2019. So that's where this confrontation, the troop mobilization, troops built up along the LAC, particularly in the northern sector, along this Ladakh region. So this is a status quo ante that India has wanted, and but whereas the Chinese are not willing to. That's been their failed. The border talks, the military level talks have failed so far. So if you look at this, the third, it's a detente that if it is a status quo ante, then it will percolate down to a detente that this will continue. Maybe you can say it's a Cold War, and maybe both countries may station their troops and prolong this stalemate. That would cost, because the cost of maintaining troops along those difficult terrain, particularly in the Trans-Himalayan region, is huge high. So they will raise the security cost, particularly on India. It's being a big, huge cost. But if India accept this new normal and move forward, then there will sort of they will move forward and sort of a new sort of cooperation. But I don't think so. That will be like a disadvantage is India. India, where the government will feel will have a backlash have in the domestic their constituencies, because it will be seen as a that there we have lost the ground. And you can see Subramania Swami's tweet whenever some flare up happens, that he keep criticizing that we have lost this much ground, that much ground, although it's not been verified, it's not an official, but there is a sort of that scenario. We can't rule out that scenario that it will have a backlash. So it's sort of a catch 22 where move forward or move backward, and that's sort of a situation that we are going to face in the coming years. I'll stop here and I'll come back with during the question and answer sessions.
Thank you, sir, for such an insightful presentation where you have elaborated what implications this law is going to have for India and the ongoing border dispute. Now, I would just check the chat box. So if anyone wants to ask any question, they can type it in the chat box or use the raise hand feature if they want to ask it themselves. Yeah, so there's one question in the chat box from Ritika Parashar, so I'll read it out. Ritika writes, respected panelist, my question is about, yeah. So Ritika, if you want to unmute and speak it yourself, or should I read it?
Yes, good evening to all. So I'm Ritik Parashar, not Ritika.
I'm sorry.
So my the question is there a hidden objective like in this law? Is there a possibility of a hidden maritime objective also? Like how how do the panelists see the future of the South China Sea with regard to this law? South China Sea and Taiwan. Yeah.
Just request, like when anyone is asking a question, also inform us who you are, to which panelist you are addressing it to, and please keep it brief. So, Professor Jagannathan or Dr. Ranjan, who take this?
Okay, thank you, Ridik. My
Sir, audio
reading of
mentioned
this,
which exactly the
Yes,
I
Rajiv,
think
go ahead.
there's a
Yeah.
lot of noise. Okay, my reading of this law is as
It's echoing
I
from
am.
your side. Yeah.
I think even the Ritik was okay.
Have you on other device? Yeah. No. Yeah. Yeah. Please.
Okay, okay. Is it good now?
Yeah.
Okay,
Perfect.
I think.
Perfect.
Okay, my reading of this law does not inform me to that this law has any maritime implication as such, because if we see that China has resolved or like solved the border dispute with all the countries, the land border country, except now India and Bhutan. So I think Chinese are more comfortable while dealing with now this land border rather than going into the maritime dimension where we see a lot of friction points. So I don't see any implication on that part. And admit to this about when the Jagan was saying that because the China doesn't have any legal uh, kind of like basis and all that, so they have framed this, formulated this law. I think in this law they have also one particular article that is like again is very interesting, that says that the research centers and council of the state will also look for the new materials. They will do research in.
Voice is breaking, Rajiv. It's a very important point, but we could not hear. It's a very important point. Your voice is breaking.
The history.
Please repeat, Rajiv. It's a very important point. We could not hear. Yeah.
I think let me go to on
I think Dr.
again.
Ranjan, you switch off your video and then because your voice is breaking.
Okay, am I audible now?
Yes,
Perfect.
sir, you are.
Clear. Please repeat your.
Okay, great. Great. Okay, Jagan was like a kind of like legal basis and all that. So this law also talks about that the research council of the state department, that is a state council or research center, should also engage in a research on the border and the land borders, and also about the historical facts and new facts and new information to kind of like claim or kind of like support their argument. So I think this is also very interesting point that we should be also doing. It's not only that not defense management and defense a kind of like border defense, but it's also about like supporting your argument. And here I think again the academia and the policy researcher could kind of like support the Chinese state about finding the new facts or new historical what is that have been missed out, or like an archival research and all that. So I think this is also crucial point to understand that China is not, as I said, it's not only the unified where the military has been entrusted. So here you have like they also try to engage the academia and other policymakers and all other policy researchers to try to like support. And coming back to again to the question that and maybe and Jagan can pitch in that I don't see any maritime implication as such or Taiwan or South China Sea as such because it's a land border.
Yeah, I agree with you, Rajiv. They are very clear about this is only to deal with land borders, and as you said that they have a clear-cut strategy towards deal with Taiwan or South China Sea, including they have been dealing with this international community as well. So I don't think so. They need such any new law to strengthen their stand in the maritime domain. They are very well poised to deal with it.
Thank you, Dr. Ranjan and Dr. Jagannathan, for insights on this very important question. Now, if there are any more participants who would like to ask some questions, they can use the raise hand feature
Yeah.
or type question.
I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yeah, sure. Piyush.
Hi, I'm Piyush. I'm from the Ministry of External Affairs. My question is to Mr. Ranjan. Is he there on the line?
Ranjan, please, yeah, mute yourself.
Yes, I'm here.
Mr. Ranjan, you mentioned that the local administration is now empowered to modify a certain regulation. Can you elaborate which particular article of the land border law gives the local administration the power to regulate or to modify as per their local needs? You made a statement like that. So this is out of the 59 articles, which particular article states that?
Okay, there are 62 articles first. Okay.
Correct. 62. That's right.
Yeah. So when I say that that entrusts the local Congress to that means the local Congress to be responsible to see the implementation, effective implementation of this, and they can also. I think there are two in 2 or 3 articles that talks about that the local people Congress and the special area that can formulate the new laws, regulation in according with this law to suit their own environment and suit their own territory. So because this law is like kind of like umbrella law. So here they don't they cannot change modify, but at least they can like if you see that for example, I think my voice is echoing again.
I think, Mr. Piyush, you can mute yourself. It is echoing the voice because of.
Yeah, so I think. Okay, what I was saying is like it's not modifying this law, but talking about the modifying the certain kind of like this. This is umbrella law. So where you have to get the kind of like light. This is like kind of like our state directive principle of the Indian Constitution, where you can formulate your own laws. The state are free to do that. So here also they I think give a kind of like overall instruction and guidance and where they entrust and give a kind of like a little bit freedom to the local Congress to implement a kind of like formulate new laws, new regulation according with this law. So that because that will be suiting their own environment and own territory in managing and defending the laws. When it says about that you have to have like a tourism and a trade on the border area, I think this is very interesting point for myself. For me, I think when I was like writing about this whole that this border management should be also entrusted with the local community. I wrote an article in Indian Expert that is local solutions. Well, because I like again going away from this assertive nationalism from like we have seen in the South Asia and China where you have a new border maps coming on in the Nepal. We have seen in Article 370. Then now we see in like as the Jagan said in Pakistan, that is Baltistan. Now we have seen in China that is the new law. So now going beyond this securitization of the whole border management, because that has not paid any dividend for like if you will see that we are again for like 70 years and then we are again fighting with the China on the border. So now there should be a kind of alternative ways, and I think here what we see is like a kind of like entrusting the locals to manage, because where if you entrust the local, then at least they can reduce the friction point where you have what I call it, of course it's kind of like the soldiers or the armies from the different region who doesn't feel a kind of like no the same the cultural attachment. Of course they have this national and attachment, not the cultural attachment where you have the local people in both sides because they have lost their family and cultural roots. So in order to reduce the friction points among these the two rivals, where you have the military boots on marching on the border area, where of course let the local inhabitants to interact. And I think there, I think of course it says that it has this the local Congress has this they can kind of like come up with the new regulation how to manage this border area. But of course, as the Kiran said, that this the border or the territory and sovereignty of China is kind of like no, you cannot negotiate. So that on that scenario, the local Congress doesn't have any power, and neither our state has. The only thing is that here you have at least two to suit, like we've seen in the Nathula, where you have given the local inhabitants to cross the border. We see in the case of like in Nepal, where the local inhabitants of like Nepalese and Chinese territory, where they go to the border area and then they kind of like buy certain things and then come back, like we do in the Nepal area, right? So I think maybe and we have seen there are like research well documented. One of the I'm just forgetting the name of this researcher who says that if we open the trade borders like border hearts, it reduces the friction point, because now we are crossing the border and we can see that what kind of the defense infrastructure is going on the other side of the border. And we have seen that after the opening of the Nathula border, we have seen less friction there instead of like we have now in Ladakh. So there, and I think that is a very interesting point that Chinese are like entrusting the local community. And as I said, we have to see also the Chinese system. Like ours are different. Like someone can question that their local Congress and our state government or state legislature works differently, and that's a different thing. I'm not commenting on that part. But the point is like this local government has been entrusted. So for me, I think this is interesting point for tourism, for trade, for a kind of like border management. You can say that in a larger sense.
Thank you, Dr. Ranjan. Now, if Dr. Jagannathan, would you like to add something?
I just want to add point. Piyush asked whether which articles out of 62 articles Is it mentioned in a particular specific articles?
Okay, let me because I think I have to see it. Let me go through it.
Okay, yeah, sure.
Okay.
Meanwhile, I just wanted to add one point, maybe to Piyush. See, this local empowerment of local administration is to sort of build their. It's a process of building their legitimacy, or I would say that to climb the legitimate on the ground. That's what they are lacking. And you see, all these regions are autonomous region as per their existing the legal base. These are all autonomous region. So if any overarching centralized law is being enacted by the People's Congress, and if it has to have an impact, like we have this JNK situation that for now, the after the JNK Reorganization Act, that the delimitation process is already been started. What the delimitation is doing it's redrawing that the legislative boundaries and constituencies. Maybe even if it is a Pakistan occupied Jammu Kashmir, Gilgit Baltistan, since the Reorganization Act recognize those as an integral part of Jammu and Kashmir, when you do the delimitation process, their constituencies will also be demarcated and delimited in the process. In order to strengthen your legitimate claim over the territory.
Thank you, Dr. Jagannathan, for your comments, and Dr. Ranjan for for being here today. Now, I would like to invite Shreyoshi ma'am to give the vote of thanks and end today's session.
Can I add the article that Mr. Pius has asked about? This is Article 23 and 30, that the local provincial government, like Congress, they can formulate their own local laws according to their requirements. So that is 23 and 30. And I think there are also 55 also. I have to go through again. So 23 and 30 is like sure.
Thank you, sir. And Kiran, if you have time for one more question from myself.
Yes, sure, sir. Just keep it brief.
It'll be a brief question. Mr. Ranjan or maybe Mr. Jagat can answer it. That are there any other countries who have reacted to it, like Russia, Mongolia, because there are large thousands of kilometers of borders with these countries. So have we studied any reaction from these countries to the land border law? Thank you.
See, this is what I was also looking for it, but I could not find any countries have reacted as far as my last. I've been looking for it. Perhaps the reason is after this law was passed, only we get to see the Chinese version, but not the translated version. So perhaps that's the reason that we are not able to the other countries or maybe reading this law to comment. And it is also strange for me whenever this sort of document statement comes from the MOFA, they will immediately release along with the Chinese script with the English script, isn't it? I think this is a practice at least for last 5-6 years after this BRI started. Earlier we had to do with it. I think this is what my view on that.
Yeah, as I was saying, that Article 23, 30, and 56.
Now, I think we don't have any more questions, and it was a very fruitful discussion. So now, Shreyoshi ma'am will give the vote of thanks.
Thank you, Kiran. Honorable speakers, Dr. Jagannathan and Dr. Rajiv Ranjan, Mr. Founder Director Abhishek Ranjan, our dear moderator Kiran Chauhan, and the entire team who have worked from behind the screen, and our most valued guests, ladies and gentlemen. It's my privilege to have been asked to propose a vote of thanks on this occasion. On behalf of the Red Lantern Analytica and the entire team, I extend a very hearty vote of thanks to all the speakers for gracing your important work and sharing with us your findings and opinions today. It has always been a pleasure to listen to wise words displayed by people of wisdom like you. Today wasn't an exception. We are extremely grateful to you for touching on the very relevant subject of the day, that is China's new land border law and its meaning in regards to India. through the excellent presentation that you have demonstrated and the speeches that you have given. It created immense awareness amongst the new learners and aspiring researchers in this field. It would be our immense pleasure to invite you over and over again to spread awareness around this very important topic in the near future. Thank you once again. And we all know that RLA is a very budding organization, and we are trying our best to create a space for ourselves in the security intelligentsia. So if in the process there have been any kind of errors from our side, I hope you bear them up and forgive us for that. Thank you so much.
Thank
Have
you.
a great
Thank you very
evening
much.
ahead.
Thanks. Thank you all.
Thank you, and sorry for network glitches in between.
No,
Sorry.
perfect. It was, yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.